So my name's Niels Corfield. I work as an independent farming advisor and trainer, and I work nationally. And the work essentially is to support farmers and landowners and advisors with adopting soil health practices. So as we all know, the base ingredients of biscuits are sugar and flour, yeah? And the main thing is, to stress here, is that each of your individual sugar grain is about the same size and shape as every other. And the same with the flour. Relative to each other, each sort of flour particle is about the same size and shape, yeah? So essentially, if we allow those materials, in other words, large numbers of very fine particles that have a regular size, to self-organise, they will produce a packed structure. However, if we add the butter, and we knead that in, into the mixture, we now create a sort of non-uniform structure, or the consistency of that material has changed. So the same process is happening in the soil, In this case, your sand is analogous to sugar, it's a granular material, and your clay is analogous to flour. You get dried clay in a bag, it's a powder, isn't it? All those materials are the same size and shape relative to each other, all the sand grains and all the clay particles. Again, if we allow them to self-organise, they will produce a packed and blocky structure. So equally, if we add a binding agent in the soil, now what we create is an open structure. You can see when we're looking at this soil structure now, wherever we look, there's a space between the soil. So you want to think about what's going on in the soil, basically, your microbiology, basically, lots of tiny microscopic slugs, essentially, producing sticky substances that are gluing together soils into crumbs or aggregates. That's the technical term, aggregates, So essentially, now, our aggregate structure has an open structure, as we've shown before. Again, when we're looking at our structure now, when we've got aggregate structure in our soil, we've got open spaces, That is essentially, that's what gives us our soil its porosity. That's what allows water to infiltrate, to percolate into it, like in coffee grounds, But equally, we've also created surface area as well. These kind of rounded and bobbly structures are now places that water films can collect, wrapping around the individual aggregate. But equally, inside the aggregate, it's also porous, it's also hollow inside, or it's got a honeycomb structure, if you like, So it's got a sponge structure, which means it can soak up water, So the surface area and the sort of porosity of the aggregates themselves is where we get our water retention from, So that now means that we can have soils that are fully hydrated and aerated. So another way to think about aggregate structure is it's a little bit like the pit props in a deep shaft mine. What's the structure of a deep shaft mine like without the pit props? So essentially all that structure that you've created just collapses. It collapses back into that dense, solid mineral mass. Similar stories happening in the soil. So essentially your aggregates are like the pit props. They're the ones that are holding the soil open. So without aggregation, you've got no pit props, No pit props means we're back to a packed structure, What's an old money term to describe packed structures in soil? Compaction, exactly, So essentially the take-home message here is that your soils are either aggregated or they're compacted. If there's no aggregation, it will be compacted, with the exception of a small number of people that are working on grade 1 self-aggregating soils. But for all the rest of us in the real world, your soils are either aggregated or they're compacted. It's one or the other. Soils that are in poor health are compacted by definition. So what are your compaction indicators then? Well, again, the first one is poaching. Locky soil, poached soil, So essentially, poaching is a compaction indicator. It is telling you that your soils lack sponge structure. Rutting, we would say, is also a same indicator. Again, that sponge structure. You could take a kitchen sponge, put it in the car park and park a truck on it for a week. Yeah, as soon as you back that vehicle off, basically, it's back to where it was. So again, muddy boots, another compaction indicator, and sticky soils. So that equally, then we would say squelchy soil and standing water is a compaction indicator. Runoff is a compaction indicator, yeah? And again, if you've got water moving, if you've got water standing, you've got water moving, yeah? But equally, we'd also say that erosion is a compaction indicator. It's telling us that the water can't get into the soil, therefore it's running off the surface and it's taking soil with it. But equally, we would say that cracking and frost heave as well would be another example of a compaction indicator, as are docks and rushes. Put management at the top of the list. Yeah, so essentially what we're talking about here is grazing management. Yeah, and why we'd ask the question essentially, why have we put management at the top of the list? Well, fundamentally, we've established through our monitoring work that management is the cause of the issues that we're dealing with day to day. To my mind, if you want clean ground, cell graze, yeah? And equally, if you want swards composed of high ME grasses, productive grasses, cell graze. If all you can do, for example, is halve your paddocks, you've halved the time that the animals spend in that paddock, for example, you've halved the number of times they're taking the second bite, yeah? So essentially, you can either increase the size of your groups or reduce the size of the fields. They have exactly the same effect. These changes in management translate to yield, or really we should say they translate to stocking rate. In the mechanical realm, we're sort of working from the bottom upwards, yeah? Working with the bulk soil, if you like. And we're looking at sort of interventions like subsoiling, for example. The data shows that over the control, all treatments increase infiltration, yeah? And all increase dry matter production. Another bit of kit, again, particularly effective on heavy land or on stony land, yeah, where we can't really run subsoilers. But again, this point here is probably one of the key factors, is the soil needs to get to a point where it will actually shatter. Otherwise, where running grasses are present, okay, so this is probably one of the main sort of final mechanical interventions. We might want to do some harrowing, essentially. So another strategy we can be looking at is mineral interventions. And that's going to, I think of that sort of working from the middle outwards, that's sort of working at the molecular level, if you like. This is where we're talking about materials like gypsum, sulfur, lime, etc. So the kind of final class of interventions then is biological, yeah? And again, this is essentially where we're sort of trying to stimulate root growth, so we're sort of working from the top down, essentially. So we're talking about overseeding, reseeding, biostimulants, and others. So if you are reseeding, then it's a no-brainer to plant mixtures rather than straights. Another way to add seed is potentially looking at bale grazing. Potentially you would do this in the season, try and find some species-rich hay and then roll it out under the fence. Yep. And essentially what you create is a sort of mobile, temporary, in-field feeding alley or feeding lane. Yep. And each day this moves up. Yep. And the fence enables you to get good utilisation for that material you've applied, basically. It prevents them camping on it or loafing on it. So this is essentially taking green hay or fresh cut hay from a species-rich meadow, like a triple SI, for example, and then you use a forage harvester, put it straight into a muck spreader, take it to the field you want to seed, then spread it directly on that field and then strip graze across that. Okay, so again, take-home message here is that biological interventions are building aggregate structure and they're increasing plant size. So you can conclusions here is that management fundamentally has led to that loss of roots in your pastures. Consequently, you've seen a loss of aggregate structure, and then comes compaction, otherwise known as poor soil health. So again, if you want one word to describe good soil health, it's aggregation. One word to describe poor soil health is compaction. So your conclusions are then that compaction is led to that reduced production because of that poor use efficiency of free resources. So the outcomes from this is we can grow more grass, probably significantly more grass. We can increase stocking rates, again probably quite significantly. And from that we can increase farm incomes. As well as that we can lengthen the growing season. We can consequently then reduce housing costs and also reduce damage in the shoulders. In other words, reduce or eliminate nitrogen requirements. But either way, that will translate to a reduced cost of production, and that when it does roll round again like this winter, it's not going to be a big deal basically. But critically, we're moving to production from free resources. Ain't no one charging for the sun, the air, or the rain basically. So the more you turn that into grass production, the more we're delivering on sort of meat from grass. So essentially that's my kind of conclusion here. If we change management, we can weather any storm, basically.